All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking all about, well, the AI era and what's going on out there. And something that will always be part of every enterprise solution is security. Yes, indeed, security. My business partner, Dr. Robin Bloor, a British gentleman, once joked, every company has one man in charge of security, and his name is Scapegoat. He's joking that it's a difficult position to be in because you're always under attack. Large organizations are constantly under attack. But my next guests know a lot about this stuff. In fact, a company called Upwind, they just had a nice fundraise. So they're moving the markets and trying to get into new accounts. And I really like what I heard so far, a focus on runtime and a focus on DevOps. So we hear from Amiram Shachar of Upwind and also Rinki Sethi. So Rinki, maybe I'll throw it over to you first. You were a customer of Upwind and then joined the team. I hear that all the time. And it's an excellent sign because the customers are the ones that have to prove the value. And you talked about this focus of DevOps because especially when you focus on runtime, you are getting way down into the weeds, into the actual execution of processes across the organization. That's a good place to find trouble if trouble exists, right, Rinki?
Yeah, I think and like Amiram's the one that taught me this, but it's like you of course you have to, for compliance reasons, have your configuration checked in cloud and all of that. But the attacks are happening at runtime, and if you don't have security products that are examining what's happening real time, you're going to miss the attacks that are happening. And so like for to solve for true security, not just compliance, you do have to be running where your applications are running and making sure that you have security visibility there and in real time are alerted so that you can stop attacks from happening.
Well, and hybrid cloud is now the de facto standard. I think AI has been a bit of a forcing function there. Maybe Amram, I'll bring you in to comment on that. I've said for years that the rumors of on-prem's demise have been greatly exaggerated. On-prem is going to be here forever. Cloud is great for certain workloads, for certain business cases, for example, but hybrid is the future. And hybrid is pretty complex. I mean, when you're trying to monitor what's happening on-prem and in the cloud, that requires a fairly agile and penetrating system, right? Can you talk about how you're able to handle these hybrid environments?
Yeah, so first of all, I think you're right. Hybrid is not going anywhere. On-prem is not going anywhere. Hybrid is going to be the way, and hybrid in a way that you're going to have multiple clouds and on-prem. So it's not going to on about like one control plane. It's going to be
Right,
multiple control planes.
right.
And then I think the main challenge with on-prem is that you don't have like the one set of APIs that you can understand what's happening there because there is different ways. There is OpenStack, there is other ways to run on-prem. But the nice thing, like I think about the approach we've taken early in our journey at Upwind is that we're calling this approach inside out. So we don't only rely on the outside in, which is the control plane. We
Mm.
rely on the inside out and the resources that run. And then if you have a sensor that you can package and run in the cloud or run on-prem, you basically have the same consistent way to deploy that across on-prem and across the cloud. And that's what led us, like, and some of our customers who started with us with thousands of servers on-prem, and then only they moved to the cloud, like Agoda, which is like the booking.com of, Asia.
Hmm.
It's started there doing that. And I think the approach of packaging a sensor that can run anywhere, it's the approach that you can solve the hybrid problem.
Yeah. So the sensor gets deployed in different cloud environments, also on-prem. And do these sensors, I'm guessing they communicate back to the mothership. So one sensor finds something odd, sends a message back, it gets calculated. Basically, is this a real problem? Is it not a problem? Is that kind of how the system works?
So think about modern sensors, like they get telemetry, but it's
Hmm.
I think like the first version of sensors was like let's send all the telemetry, but this is really a waste of data
Right.
that is being sent
Sure.
out. So
Sure.
modern sensors actually are being built in a way that there is a sort of like a sensor manager inside the environment, that all the data
Hmm.
is being sent to that sensor manager, and that sensor manager is like kind of like compressing everything. It's like, I've seen this A and B talking a million times. I don't need to send it a million times. I can just send one row that said A and B spoke a million times, and then add metadata, aggregates, compress the data, encrypts the data, and then sends it out. So then you're ending up with having the right high fidelity information, but very optimized, very efficient way to process it externally.
Hmm. Well, it's like at the edge, right? You look at IoT solutions, for example, and you don't want to be sending every piece of data back to the data center. You want to only send the important information. And so there's a bit of a runtime that happens in the sensor as well, right? That's kind of what you're talking about. They're like
Correct.
intelligent sensors basically that wait for something significant to happen and then analyze that and then send a message back, right?
Correct. And I
Yeah.
would even add to that that it's using existing resources, so it's even efficient by design.
Oh, can you dive into that? What do you mean by that?
I mean, if you think about security as a add-on on top of your environment that you need to deploy something from the outside, it scans things and snapshot them and always take like a copy of that and scans it. That's always going to cost you with doubling your, your environment in order to scan it. But when you run it in an intelligent sensor, as you said, you're running inline in the resource. Every resource is never a 99% utilized. There is always something, there is a buffer there
Hmm.
that is always available. And then if you use that buffer for security, you're just getting something for free.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder in terms of anomaly detection, these days these cloud environments are very complex and there are new data centers cropping up every day. They're all over the United States right now. Are you able to ascertain certain patterns of machine to machine conversations and then capture that and leverage that for other clients? Or is all that data that is in a particular deployment, is that governed by that organization and you cannot share that information? Like abstracted information is kind of what I'm driving at.
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, of course, you have to abstract the information, but I can also say, Eric, that the days of patterns are over. Um,
Really?
there's no patterns anymore. Um, There's like, think about it, like once we used to have security as like signatures, right? We have
Hmm.
malware. How do you find malware? There's a virus, and everyone
Right.
knows that's the signature of that virus, and then the antivirus will go find it. This is no longer like what cloud security is all about.
Wow.
It's all being generated in real time. The exploitation comes from something that is not exposed by mistake to the internet. It's exposed to the internet because it needs to be exposed to the internet. It's a payment service. And then somebody is exploiting this or doing something, and then they're finding their way in. There is no
Hmm.
consistent way to look at this, but to have very good understanding into how bad behaviors look versus how good behaviors look and noise look,
Hmm.
which we can talk more about.
That's very interesting. And Rinki, I'll bring you back in. You said you came from Bill, so you came from the world of money. Pretty important to get money, financial transactions correct. I mean, that's why you see such a heavy focus in the financial services industry around security and around what Amiram is talking about right now, which I think is fascinating, and that there are no more patterns. I mean, there are so many attacks. I see it myself. I get phishing scams all the time. They're getting very sophisticated these days. There's one that came in, it looked like a MasterCard bill, and it was, only $34,000 this month. I'm like, okay, that doesn't look right. Don't click, don't click. I'll just throw it over to you to kind of comment on, when you were at Bill working with Upwind, what struck you? You mentioned the DevOps, but can you talk about that a little bit, the relationship between DevOps and security, which has historically been a bit of a friction-oriented environment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and it's so funny because a lot of times you run products that you have to solve, and we were going through a cloud transformation. You have to solve for security because a lot of times compliance is driving that, right? And so your regulatory requirements and compliance is driving that. You must have CSPM as an example. And so a lot of us are focused on, okay, we've got to come in and we've got to make sure our configurations are have auditing and so on and so forth. Well, that's a really static way of working, right? And when you think about like DevOps, you start sending them information and you're saying, okay, here's a ticket, please go fix this. And they're like, this is not even a real issue. And in all the context is missing. They have to go and dig in to find out what security is even talking about. And so like that was the whole kind of paradigm shift that happened with Upwind for me, which was like now you're in real time, you're looking at behaviors in real time, not just like based on signatures or patterns, as Amiram mentioned. And then you're going in and you're actually talking about real issues that can be fixed. And so DevOps looked at Upwind and they were like, this is amazing. Like this has brought down the noise from the team. And it was funny, Upwind became a noun that was like used in vocabulary every day over there. And it literally built trust between the security teams because it's a security team and the DevOps team because you're like, okay, you're not just generating noise. And they're like, this is a really good product. And they were using the maps and things like that that are inside the product. And it was a way to almost onboard DevOps folks that were coming on new into the team. And so it was a real bridge between the two teams.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I have a friend of mine who did DevOps for a very, very large software as a service company. He would talk about deploying security artifacts in the system, almost like tracers, basically, that just kind of float around. Can you kind of go into the details of how you're able to ascertain information about runtime? I mean, you talked about the sensor, but where do you actually deploy, and are you just monitoring the network, or what do you monitor? Amiram, maybe I'll throw it over to you.
So it's actually happening across the stack. It's also no longer that you will like just in an on-prem, it's very easy because you have like you're sitting in a server and then from the server you're looking to the sky and you're seeing process execution, you're seeing file access, you're seeing network requests. In the
Mm-hmm.
cloud, when you look like you don't see just the sky, you see the galaxy, which is everything else in the control plane. There is cloud logs, there is execution in the cloud, there is like other things happening in that control plane, and you need to connect the dots. So we're talking about multi-dimension signals from multiple layers.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually, like when attack happens or you want to connect the dots, it will start from an identity, like assuming other identity or using token, and then moving and doing something and spinning up a resource. By the way, Eric, most of attacks that we're seeing is that attacker is coming in and then spinning a different resource, like spinning a new resource that then the environment doesn't really know. And then that resource has privileges to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of signals you need to have together, it's pretty comprehensive. And
Yeah.
then one thing I'll just mention is that the most important areas that we've identified is the application layer, which is what we call like in technical language, the layer 7.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it really reveals like what's happening in the packet, where you're trying to go, what you're trying to do and achieve. That has been the game changer.
Yeah. Well, I remember learning from a clever person in security that one of the loopholes in many security postures is that like usually it's like once a year you'll do like a full scan and is if someone had implanted something and just let it sit there for like 14, 15 months, it's not going to get noticed. So they'll be very creative in terms of their penetration. So they penetrate and they don't do anything at all for like a year and they just sit there and wait. And then once that year has passed, they go zing and they pull the string and things starts cranking away. Is that something that you're able to detect with your profile, with your technology?
Bingo. Like that's why we're advocating so much for that runtime approach,
Mm-hmm.
because in runtime, like there's not going to be a way to hide those things.
Hmm.
Because when they interact, when they do something, when you catch a signal, you immediately can connect the dots. And that's why it's runtime. When we started, I think runtime was seen as advanced security,
Hmm.
but we worked hard to like actually define runtime as the only way to find that problem and not as an advanced security as people might used to think in the past.
Yeah, that's very good news. And we've got about a minute and a half left in this segment. Rinki, I'll throw it back over to you. That's what caught my attention when you focused on runtime, because that is literally where rubber meets road. That's where the enterprise is transacting business. Things are happening, whatever it may be, whether it's file access or a firewall or some application doing something. If you are able to monitor that low level flow of information and execution, you're seeing what's really happening. The key is to have some kind of a model that can interpret all that, and that's what you guys have with Upwind, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. I mean, you were talking about like what you described in the attacker sitting there. It's like nation state attack. And it's like I compare it a lot to like the days of antivirus, right? And like where you used to scan and everything was signature based. And then everything shifted to being like, okay, you don't need signature-based detection. It doesn't work anyway. And so like, let's
Wow.
catch it when the malware is executing and stop it from happening. And this is the shift that's happening right now around runtime. And I do believe there's a massive data explosion right now. There's with AI, it's going to get even crazier. And already security analysts are way behind in being able to fix all the issues they need to. You see the backlogs constantly. And a lot of the issues, maybe they're not even really existent. How are you going to get to the truth? It's by being at runtime. You
Right.
have to then you're finding issues that actually matter in real time. And that's the only
Wow.
way I think that we're going to be able to scale as an industry is starting to like really deploy at runtime.
Yeah, that is fascinating stuff. Well, folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, a fascinating show talking about the nexus of AI and security, and of course, operations. And Rinki Sethi from Upwind, I'll throw it over to you first. The runtime focus. I mean, I get it, but a lot of folks may not really fully understand what we mean by that and why it's important. So, do you want to dive into that real quick?
Yeah, I learned about runtime probably about 3 or 4 years ago when I actually first met Amiram. And Amiram was telling me, like, Rinki, we are building in the runtime security space. And at that time, they were really Upwind was really focused on how do we complement CSPM vendors that exist today that are focused on the posture and the configurations, and really build a strong technology in runtime. And I remember looking at him saying, like, I never heard this. What are you doing? Like, what's runtime? I have no idea. I don't hear anybody else talking about it. Like, why
That's
are you
funny.
focused on this? And he was like, Rinky, there's going to be a massive data explosion. AI is starting to gain traction. And how are you, even right now, what are you seeing in your CSPM tool? And how are your DevOps team and your security folks feeling? And I'm like, well, we have a backlog. We were going through a cloud transformation. Analysts are not able to keep up. And then a lot of times the DevOps team gets mad because there's issues without any context. And he was like, this is exactly what we're trying to solve. It's like, why do you even need to do that? You're doing it for compliance. But like really, you're going to have runtime tech to be able to scale for the future. And I was like, what is runtime? And it was like, you have to understand what your applications are doing, how they're behaving at any given moment, and know if there's an attacker that's actually targeting those, and know it in real time, know it, at runtime. And so I was like, you know what? That's 100% right. Why are we all focused on CSPM as an industry? And it's a lot of that is compliance driven. Well, fast forward now, we have the entire cloud security platform, but we were built with like the most important thing in mind, which is runtime security. And now, like every single company is talking about how important runtime is. Every cybersecurity company is, and I think there's like massive education we need to do in the market, because this is going to be the most important thing. And so, I think that it's something that we're shifting. The whole industry is shifting really to think about runtime, but there's still a lot of education that needs to happen that we can't just solve for compliance. We've got to solve for security as well.
Right. No, no kidding. And Amar, maybe I'll bring you back in on this one. AI governance, AI security, this is a whole new ball of wax. And I'll throw out one of my comments and get you to respond to this. I thought to myself, enterprise AI is kind of like a final exam that's sprung on you halfway through the semester. I think that's what's happening with a lot of organizations. They're like, wait a minute, I thought we had another whole semester before the final exam. Nope, it's final exam right now. Take that test every day. And that's kind of what's happening, right? Because there's this forcing function to leverage AI, whether for Gen AI or other old-fashioned AI models, but understanding what goes into that, the whole workflow around it, what gets generated, what's going up into the cloud, what's not going. These are all real key issues to understand and to address. So how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, and I'll say something, Eric, is I think some folks think that AI is hyped. And I think actually the opposite. I think AI is underhyped
Interesting.
because, probably, you and I and Rinky, we were born into the generation that we saw like, what is like a CPU that can actually give you logarithmic actions, right? It was amazing. See what humanity were able to do with that. And now
Hmm.
this is the first time ever that a computer can think, not just like give you a deterministic answer of like how much one, plus one is. It's like it can think. They have large language models, like things that humanity will be able to do with AI is just beyond our imagination. And I think it's underhyped. And it's just like a preparation for the answer, which is I think AI is pushing all the boundaries on everything that we know about cloud security, because AI lives everywhere. It lives in the cloud infrastructure. It lives in the
Right,
on-prem, in
right.
service providers, lives on our phones, and then AI also like has frameworks. Sometimes you don't actually just use ChatGPT for AI. You can just use like a framework of AI, like Hugging Face or something like that that
Hmm.
touches your data, do something like learn it. And then there's like AI apps that you're building, and you're exposing like any bank exposes like AI app to their clients, and clients can actually hack it and tell the AI what to do. So the AI problem is like really multi-stage, multi-dimension, and it's requiring a lot from the security vendors and the industry.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, if you can focus on the runtime and actually observing what's happening second by second, even, even millisecond by millisecond, I suppose, that is an excellent way. I mean, you're at the ground level. So if you can absorb that feed or monitor that feed and watch out for strange things happening in various environments too, like you say, in different clouds. It's not going to be one cloud. And I'll say this, it's not going to be one model either. You're going to have companies with lots of different models that are doing lots of different things, and you need to understand the whole workflow around that. And what gets to that is runtime, right, Amiram?
Correct. And thinking about it, there is like just two assumptions that we are betting on, that AI can only be protected at runtime.
Mm,
There's some stuff of governance and of course posture that you need to have on your AI, but like true AI security can only be at real time, which is like where you get input and output. And then second is we talked about in a different conversation, but it's like the application layer. This is what really drives the AI security. When you see
hmm.
what's happening between the AI client and the AI server, this is where you know what are the intent between
Mm,
those two,
hmm.
parties in the transaction. And this is where you can apply the real AI security.
Yeah.
Actually, NVIDIA and others providers are like helping actually to like create models that understand these intents and help you secure it.
That's interesting. And a last question I'll throw over to you. I always think about other uses of technologies. And if you've got this really powerful analysis of runtime, can that be used then? Are you now using that information to help your clients design better systems, design better infrastructure? Is that part of what you offer?
Yes, and there's just no reason why not to solve this problem with AI. It's solved much better with AI when you have a large reasoning and language model, and the accuracy and efficiency and ability to help security teams is just on a different scale.
Yeah. And maybe, Rinky, I'll let you throw some closing thoughts out as well. Again, from the financial world, making sure those financial transactions happen swiftly and efficiently for the right people is pretty important. And the industry is moving very quickly. I will tell you, I used to work at a bank. I was a teller at a bank. I won't say how many years ago, multiple decades. And things have changed dramatically since then. You used to have to hold a check for a week, or if it was an out-of-state check, it would be for 2 weeks. That was the standard. Now checks can clear instantaneously. You have all kinds of pressure to get things done fast, and that's the one side of the dynamic. And the other side is you still have to protect all that stuff. So there's just a forcing function every day on finance and making sure these transactions are correct, right?
Absolutely. Eric, you're talking about checks. At least we can relate. My kids are like, what is that? How come you can't just do it? Can't just send the money, right? So they don't
Right,
even know. But yeah,
right.
I mean, I think like the way we used to do security, even when you think about companies that started building 5, 6 years ago, building for the cloud complexity back then, they're no longer we now need a new solution. And I think that's where Upwind comes in, and Upwind's building like security for the future and the cloud complexity that exists. And to your point, the complexity that exists to be able for us to accelerate the way we do financial transactions with the right, scrutiny from a cybersecurity perspective. And so we do have to think about the complexity has completely changed in cloud. You then bring in AI and you bring in this data explosion that we talked about. And runtime is the future for that.
Yeah. And we got about 90 seconds left. Amram, I'll throw it over to you. Quantum, I know a bunch of people in the quantum space. There are interesting things happening. it's still pretty far off in terms of commercial availability and putting things in production. But what do you think about the quantum threat overall to security?
I think once quantum, as you said, it's very early days, but once it's available, it's going to change security forever because then encryption will not going to have any meaning
Hmm.
because you can get any type of data that is encrypted and
Wow.
read the data.
Right. So basically
So
when you're saying like the patterns are gone now because there's just too much, it's just that it's an avalanche of attacks basically. So the patterns don't matter. The old-fashioned way of doing things don't matter, and quantum's going to do the same kind of thing somewhere in the near future.
correct.
Yeah.
So that's why when quantum, I think secure, like with quantum security, so I think like the way we're thinking about it in the future is that if attacker was able to break in, game over. Because once they put the information on your data, even if it's encrypted in transit at rest, they can
Wow.
see it.
Wow. Well, folks, look these folks up online. Upwind is the company. Rinki, Sethi, and Amiram Shachar. Nice talking to you, folks. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.